Hello and welcome to the Grandfather's Cave. In previous videos I've been walking you through Castle Caldwell and Beyond, an old Dungeons & Dragons module number B9. It was criticized back in its time because it was very rough, had a lot of typos, and was not very imaginative in its descriptions and in the mapping of the dungeons. In previous videos I revised Castle Caldwell and the Dungeons of Terror beneath the castle. As you might know, the module, Castle Caldwell and Beyond, is an anthology of 5 different adventures, and the last 3 of them seem to be totally disconnected from the first 2. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can connect the first 2 adventures with the third one, the rescue of Princess Sylvia, and how you can improve that adventure with some simple tricks. If you're new to this channel and have not done so already, I suggest that you subscribe to this channel and press the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the future videos. Now let's roll initiative and let's get started. In its original version, the Abduction of Princess Sylvia is a very standard rescue the princess adventure. Princess Sylvia is about to get married, and the rival has her kidnapped, and the king offers a reward to anyone who can rescue her. The player characters are led to a dungeon where Princess Sylvia is being held captive by an evil wizard by a local peasant. When the player characters enter the dungeon, they realize that it is occupied by goblins and lizardmen, and both groups are in the service of an evil wizard. This evil wizard, called Oliver of Horn, uses illusions to deceive the player characters, and in the end the player characters face off against Oliver of Horn and his pet owlbear in their attempt to rescue the princess. This setup is totally disconnected from all the other adventures in the module. What I propose that you do as a GM is that when the player characters have completed the clearing of Castle Caldwell and afterwards beaten the monsters in the Dungeons of Terror, that the player characters are once more contacted by Clifton Caldwell. The way I ran this adventure, Clifton Caldwell had 2 daughters, and one of them has been abducted by an evil wizard who is holding her for ransom. This evil wizard, which I call Oliver of Horn, is actually in league with the bandits that occupy Castle Caldwell. And finding out that the very rich Clifton Caldwell has purchased the castle, he decides to abduct one of the daughters to make this wealthy person cough up some money for his organization. While the original dungeon was occupied by goblins and lizardmen, I find these 2 creature types to be too dissimilar to function properly in this dungeon. On the one side you have the goblins, who are small evil creatures, and on the other side you have the lizardmen, who while neutral are sufficiently unintelligent to be manipulated by an evil wizard. But in truth the lizardmen are much more at home on their own in a swamp, and therefore I decided to substitute the lizardmen with hobgoblins. Hobgoblins are related to ordinary goblins, and I think that they fill in the position of elite warriors much better than lizardmen in this context. Let's look at the original setup of this dungeon. The dungeon is called the Fortress of Oliver of Horn. This appears to be a typo, as the text of the adventure clearly states that his name is Oliver of Horn. The first area of this dungeon is the entrance. The player characters find a sleeping goblin sitting on a chair. The players should be able to dispatch him very easily, but as soon as they have done so, a lizardman walks in from area 2. The lizardman speaks to the player characters in common and seems to be both articulate and worried about the well-being of the goblin. These 2 traits do not really fit with the generally unintelligent lizardman, who would normally rather eat a goblin than save them. This is one of the reasons why I want to substitute the lizardmen with hobgoblins. Area 2 has a secret passage connecting to Area 5. This area seems to be filled with both yellow mold and green slime. This makes the passage very dangerous, not only to the adventurers, but also to the goblins inhabiting the area. And therefore, I want to do something different with it, but I'll get into that in a moment. Area 3 is a very large hall, filled with target dummies and bales of hay, and within the player characters will see Princess Sylvia being held captive by an owlbear. The players are assumed to want to engage this owlbear, and after spending some resources and interacting with the owlbear, they find out that it's just an illusion. This illusion was created by Oliver of Horn, who is hiding in Area 4 and watching the player characters through a peephole. While I intend to use this illusion trick in my own version of this dungeon, my setup is a bit different. Area 5, which connects to Area 2, is the living quarters of the goblin leader and 2 of his warriors. Like most other areas in this dungeon, this area is not very well described. Area 6 is occupied by 5 more goblins. Area 7 can be accessed through a trapdoor. Behind the door, the player characters will find a better appointed room, with a bed, some rugs, some chairs, and a wardrobe. This appears to be the evil wizard's bedroom. And if the player characters examine the wardrobe, they might be able to find a secret door leading into Area 13, where Princess Sylvia awaits her rescuers. Area 8 is much like Area 5. It's the quarters of the lizardman leader, however, and along with him, the player characters will face 2 ordinary lizardmen warriors. Connecting Area 8 and Area 9, there's a small submerged cavern, where the lizardmen keep their treasures. And in Area 9, the player characters will face 3 lizardmen warriors. Area 10 is a secret treasure room, and if the player characters trigger a trap in here, they will release 3 zombies that will attack them while they try to collect the treasure within. Area 11 is a dining hall, and within, the player characters will find a goblin that is very dissatisfied with his task. The player characters might be able to talk with this goblin and learn something about the secret doors concealing Area 13. Just like Area 11, Area 12 is also occupied by a dissatisfied goblin. This, however, is a kitchen. The interactions and the dialogues with the goblins in Area 11 and Area 12 are exactly the same, which makes me believe that these 2 goblins originally were meant to be one and the same. And Area 13 is a large library. There are many bookshelves and workbenches. And within, Princess Sylvia is found bound to a chair, guarded by a charmed owlbear under the control of the evil wizard. After defeating the owlbear and either killing, capturing, or routing the wizard, the players can free Princess Sylvia and bring her back to the king. In order to connect this adventure with the clearing of Castle Caldwell and the Dungeons of Terror, and in order to make the encounters of this dungeon better connected, I have made some basic changes. Looking at the map, the first thing you'll notice are the stairs. I have put in a lot of stairs, thus changing the elevation levels within the dungeon. This gives the dungeon some variation, but also plays a significant role with regard to Area 13, because as you can see, Area 13 is now directly connected to Area 3. I have created a passage connecting Area 13 with a balcony in Area 3. Thus, a character can stand on this balcony observing what goes on in Area 3 with relative safety. This balcony should make it obvious to the player characters that there is a secret chamber in the level above, thus guaranteeing that the player characters will search for this secret room, which would otherwise be completely concealed. And while the elevation should discourage player characters from trying to climb onto the balcony, it does provide the player characters with a last-ditch opportunity to access Area 13. As mentioned, I have also exchanged the lizardmen for hobgoblins. I have given these hobgoblins an additional hit die so that they provide a challenge similar to that of the lizardmen. As I view this adventure, the hobgoblins are the leaders of the goblins. They provide the evil wizard with needed muscle and can instill discipline in the unruly goblins. Starting with Area 1, I have only made one change. I have added a stair leading up to the dungeon entrance. To me, this makes entering the dungeon more foreboding and also makes the elevation difference in the other parts of the dungeon more significant. In this area, the player characters will find a sleeping goblin on one of the chairs, but after defeating the goblin, they are not interrupted by a hobgoblin. This hobgoblin was on guard duty within Area 2. As I see it, Area 2 is more organized in this version. On the table within this room, there's a ledger where a hobgoblin on duty would note comings and goings of patrols that leave the dungeon. And there's a weapon rack as well. And while goblins and hobgoblins can see in the dark, they have a very hard time discerning writing in the dark. And thus within this room there's an oil lamp lighting the area around the table. Within Area 2A I have kept the mold, since I think that it would be easy for the goblins and the hobgoblins not to touch the mold on the wall. However, I have removed the green slime, since it would pose a direct threat to anyone walking this area, not only the adventurers. Thus I think it's completely unrealistic that the goblins and the hobgoblins would allow it to exist within their own lair. Within Area 3, the player characters will still find the illusion of the princess, whom in this version of the adventure is Clifton Caldwell's daughter, and the owlbear. Being a minor illusion spell, the illusion only has visual components. It makes neither sound or has any odor, and thus I hope that the player characters will simply expend some of their resources before realizing that this is an illusion. However, there's one more point to this illusion, which I will get into when describing Area 13. In this version of the dungeon, Area 3 is more than a combat sparring area. I have moved the sparring dummies away from the eastern wall and placed them more in the center of the room, allowing maneuvering around the dummies. I have added the trophies of the hobgoblins on the walls, the heads of a bear, a direwolf, a moose, and a large elk. There are weapon racks with spears, and there's both a forge and some anvils, which the hobgoblins use for crafting and repairing their weapons. Thus, under normal circumstances, this area will be bustling with activity as the hobgoblins practice and maintain their gear, as well as attempt to train the unruly goblins. Overlooking this area is the balcony. The balcony is shrouded in darkness, and unless the player characters have alarmed the inhabitants of the dungeon to their presence, the wizard, whom I call Ovilar, will not be present. If the player characters in any way have brought attention to themselves, Ovilar, however, will be present on this balcony, hiding in the shadows out of sight from the player characters, but casting his illusion and drawing the attention of the adventurers. Area 4, which in the original version of this adventure is where Ovilar is hiding and maintaining his illusion, is now a simple observation chamber with an arrow slit. Should the player characters trigger a grand melee within Area 3, there would be a goblin hiding in here, peppering the player characters with arrows. Area 5 is still the quarters of the goblin leader, and he shares it with his two most trusted goblin guards, which I have given the maximum total hit points possible. Also, I have connected this area with Area 6 through a door, and both Area 5 and Area 6 can be closed off from the main corridor by doors. As you can see, Area 6 is now decorated with the pallets on which the goblins sleep and some furniture that lies scattered around. While I imagine that the hobgoblins would instill the goblins with a lot of discipline, counting for the neat rows in which the beds lie, the goblins have been fighting among themselves, and therefore the player characters will find scattered furniture in the northern end of the room. I have made no changes to Area 7. This is still the bedroom of the evil wizard, and the door into this area is still trapped with a poison needle. However, the player characters are much more likely to search for a secret door in the western side of this room if they have seen the balcony in Area 3. Area 8 and 9 have also been closed off from the main corridor with doors. And Area 8 is the quarters of the hobgoblin leader. This is an organized place where the hobgoblin guards have neatly made beds and weapons placed orderly in racks. Unlike the goblins who lounge around in their quarters, these two goblin guards are standing at attention, and the area next to their beds is the living quarters of the hobgoblin leader. He has a wolf trophy on the wall, he has a desk with a lot of notes and a neatly made bed. Area 8 and 9 are still connected, but the corridor leading west out of the hobgoblin leader's quarters is now closed off by a locked door, and behind this locked door the player characters will not find a submerged cavern. They will, however, find a small cave with a chest on the western and on the eastern side of the room. These chests contain the goblin and hobgoblin salaries, as well as the hobgoblin leader's own wealth. And while this room is connected to Area 9, it is closed off by a one-direction secret door. Thus, this passage makes for a good secret exit for the hobgoblin leader, but does not allow hobgoblins or anyone else to access the treasure room without the hobgoblin leader noticing it. Area 9 is occupied by 3 hobgoblins. If the player characters enter this dungeon at night time, these hobgoblins might be found in Area 3 instead at the GM's discretion. I have made no changes to Area 10. This is still a secret treasure room and still has a trap that will release 3 zombies into the room if the player characters are not careful. Area 11 is still a dining hall, which is being cleaned by a goblin thrall. This goblin is the weakest of the whole band and has 1 single hit point. He is still dissatisfied with his lot in life and is willing to cooperate with the player characters. And just as the original, Area 12 is a kitchen, where the player characters will find a goblin cook that is willing to talk and cooperate with the player characters, just as a thrall in Area 11. And finally, Area 13. The likelihood for the players to search for a secret door in order to enter this area is much larger now that the player characters can see the balcony in Area 3. Entering this area, the player characters will find Clifton Caldwell's daughter tied on a chair as she is guarded by an owlbear. This owlbear has been charmed by Ovilar Horn and will attack anyone entering the room that is not a goblin or a hobgoblin. Aside from being charmed, Ovilar has also cast a silence spell on the bear, and thus if the bear charges player characters, they will not be able to hear any sounds, and they might think that this too is an illusion. It is likely that the player characters will waste the first round of combat trying to disbelieve the bear. Of course, they will realize that the bear is very real as soon as it hits one of them in combat. When the player characters engage the owlbear in combat, Ovilar of Horn will come into view behind the bear, attacking the player characters with first and second level spells like Sleep, Magic Missile, and Web. When I ran this adventure, one of the characters attempted to use a Speak with the Animal spell in order to calm the owlbear. I think that was very creative and would have rewarded the player for doing so, but alas, the owlbear was silenced and could not hear the cleric attempting to make contact with the owlbear. Area 13 is full of bookshelves, and aside from the normal treasure within this dungeon, I think the GM should place tomes and scrolls with wizard and cleric spells within this area. The way I ran this adventure, Clifton Caldwell's daughter suggested to the players that they bring Ovilar Horn to the magistrate so that he might be rightfully punished. If the player characters do this, I suggest that you reward them with a bounty, but also that you let Ovilar escape from the authorities. Ovilar can be an interesting recurring villain, especially if you connect him with the bandits that were inhabiting Castle Caldwell during the first adventure. As you can see, very minor changes to the map of this adventure makes it more enjoyable both to run and for players to explore. Also, changing the lizardmen to hobgoblins within this adventure makes it much easier to connect with the previous ones. And if you're running module B1 to B9 in Search of Adventure, you can even connect Owl of Horn to the hobgoblins from Horror on the Hill in that adventure. I really enjoyed revising these adventures and trying to connect the dots so that they make more sense. And if you have found that useful or interesting as well, let me know in the comments section. If you also want me to revise the other adventures, Elwyn's Sanctuary and The Great Escape, please let me know in the comments. Or if you have other adventures that you would like me to revise, let me know. I'll take a look at it. In future videos, I intend to bring more adventure ideas like this one and to mix them with my alternate Dungeons & Dragons rules that I called Aven Fantasy RPG. If you enjoyed the contents of this video and found it useful, press the like button and leave a comment. And if you have not done so already, subscribe and press the notification bell so that you don't miss it. Until next time, keep slaying.